Okay, let me preface this by saying that Friedrich William Nietzsche's sister bowdlerized his works and gave it to the Nazis. It was not his philosophy. In fact, he would have been anti-Nazi if he'd been around when they were alive. He wrote 100 years before they were in power. This is about Friedrich W. Nietzsche's Antichrist. Everybody talks about the Antichrist. Nobody knows anything about it. Let's see which one's first. Start with this one. Nietzsche says that Christianity is based on premises which are false, that if you remove any one of the premises, that the whole thing will fall like a house of cards. Let's start with what he says Christ denied. What did Christ deny? Christ denied three things: the Pharisees, the hypocrites, the established church of his day. The Pharisees only followed church law in public. They gave to the poor when they saw people watching them give to the poor. In private, they could care less about the poor. The hypocrites, those who believe something under what they say they believe differently than what they say. Those who say one way but believe another. Hippo means under, hypo means under belief, creto means I believe. The established church of the day, the ruling sect of the day, the Sanhendrin, was different than Jesus' sect. He was from a different sect, and they were in conflict. He did not like the ruling sect of his day. We'll call that sect the church of his day. So what did Christ deny? He denied precisely everything that today is called Christian. The Pharisees, the hypocrites, the established church of his day. In fact, if you follow the logic, everything today called Christian is in reality anti-Christian. Nietzsche goes further, saying, in fact, there are no Christians alive today. We don't see anyone volunteering to die on the cross, he says. Now, you see people volunteering to get on the cross in the Philippines, get dragged around on the cross, to get nailed to the cross even, but you don't see them volunteering to die on the cross. They're taken off the cross. The only ones I know that killed people on the cross was the Nazis in the concentration camps who were putting Jews on the cross saying they were Christ killers. When it turns out the Nazis killed more people than anybody ever in the history of the world and had nothing. We're not Christian, as you can see here. But Martin Luther had them thinking that the Jews were the problem. The problem was the Nazis were the problem. The resurrection is the biggest lie ever told in history. The apostles stole the body and burned it at night. The kingdom of heaven was a change of heart. It is not in outer space and somewhere. It does not mean it's not of this world. The kingdom of heaven is not of this world. Does not mean it is in outer space somewhere. It is how you treat your enemies by not resisting evil, by loving your enemies. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Immortality was an idea from ancient Egyptian astronomers who thought stars were immortal, eternal. Immortality was for pharaohs, emperors, and kings. It wasn't for the slaves. Egyptians didn't have telescopes. They never saw a star nova. They didn't know stars were born and died. Socrates and Plato never proved the existence of an eternal soul. It was assumed, proven later in Christianity. The Phaedo had 5 proofs that did not hold water. Plato wrote the Phaedo. There's no permanent body, no permanent soul, and you can think of the body as the soul since it lasts about 100 years if you take care of it. Mary was a young woman. The Hebrew word for young woman was mistranslated from the Hebrew as virgin. It did not mean virgin. It meant something like young woman. World is a Christian term of abuse. All talk of other worlds is a slander of this world. We're talking about Friedrich Nietzsche's Antichrist. Christianity is a Jewish sect, he says. Christians are more Jewish than the real Jews. There was only one evangel. bringer of glad tidings, and he died on the cross. All the rest are disangels, bringers of sad tidings. The apostles stole the body. The resurrection was the biggest lie ever told in history. Paul needed the death on the cross plus something else, the resurrection. Sacrificing an innocent lamb off to atone for the sins of the guilty was a pagan ritual. Well, the apostles couldn't figure out why their leader was crucified, because crucifixion was the most ignominious way to die at the time. So they said it was the sacrifice of an innocent for the atone for the sins of the guilty. That idea actually came from ancient Egypt, from Horus, who was the son of Isis and Osiris. And Osiris had been killed by his brother, and Isis had gotten pregnant supposedly after he was dead. But in one version of the myth, she gets pregnant before he's dead. So Mary maybe was pregnant before Jesus was born, although his real name wasn't Jesus in the original Hebrew. In the original Hebrew, his name was something like Joshua. Crucifixion was the most ignominious way to die at the time. You couldn't even crucify a Roman citizen. The Jewish slaves resented the Roman nobility. They wanted to destroy the Roman nobility. To do so, they decided to destroy the nobles' values. They wanted to invert the values, and to do this, they put their God on the cross, making the nobles' lowest value their highest value. It took 1,000 years, Nietzsche said, but it worked. So that today it is impossible to have nobility. An example of mine is it took 8 years, but the Rebs destroyed Bill Clinton's reputation. They didn't care about bin Laden or fighting terrorism, but spent all of their time with their attention focused on Monica Lewinsky's dress. For all the trillions of dollars Reagan and the rest spent on defense, they didn't have a pea shooter to stop a plane from flying into the Pentagon. When Clinton was in the White House, he and Richard Clark scrambled the Air Force to stop a plane from crashing in a stadium full of people. Alex Jones says Clinton didn't do anything to stop terrorism. That's bull. And this guy on Alex Jones, who claims to be Victor Ostrovsky, is saying the opposite of what Ostrovsky said in his book. Ostrovsky said in his book that the USS Liberty was attacked by the Israelis deliberately. On the video, he has a guy claiming he's Ostrovsky saying that didn't happen deliberately. I got a feeling he doesn't have Ostrovsky on the videos, but this is by the way. W wouldn't even let Richard Clark into the White House, and Richard Clark was counterterrorism czar for 4 presidents: Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, and Bush Jr. And W. Bush wouldn't even let him into the White House briefings. Clark knew that it was bin Laden that blew up the basement of the Trade Center in '93. Condi Rice and Wolfowitz was saying it couldn't have been bin Laden. It had to be state-sponsored terrorism from Iraq. They were getting that baloney from the Pentagon from a spy working for the Israelis named Larry Franklin, who was caught by the FBI given our nuclear policy towards Iran to the Israeli lobby in a restaurant in D.C. And then instead of congratulating David Zaddy for arresting him, the ADL accused him of being anti-Semitic, and he ended up in retirement. And Clark, I heard, got his job back at the Pentagon. Although they say now he's in prison. I heard he was let out of prison. It's very difficult. W led in it. If Larry Franklin, an Israeli spy at the Pentagon, feed Wolfowitz, Cheney, and Connie Rice the baloney that got us into Iraq on a wild goose chase for nukes that didn't exist. The Christians, by presuming the earth is evil and ugly, have made it evil and ugly. There's more on this, which will come later.